If you were born after 1972, odds are your formative years included the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles in one capacity or another. Hitting comic book stands in 1984 as Mirage Studios' debut work after its formation by founders Kevin Eastman and Peter Laird, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, or TMNT as it's lovingly known throughout the world, except in the EU, but we'll get to that, became a marketing and pop culture phenomenon in just a few short years. The two New England artists scraped together enough money to do a small printing through tax refunds and family loans, and the first 3,000 issues ran out in a matter of weeks. Interest grew, and soon they were approached by toy companies, Playmates being the ultimate contender to walk away with the license rights. In the 80s, thanks to deep-pocketed lobbyists and a jellybean-fueled sociopath, toys meant cartoons. 22-minute long-form advertisements with catchy music and colorful animation were eagerly anticipated weekly by anyone not yet bound by the shackles of adulthood. Joining the ranks of the redundantly masculine, yet somehow very queer Himbo Man, Gastroenterology Joseph, Bougie GoBots, Royanna G. Biv, Transporter Malfunction Zoo Friends, and many others, the Turtles quickly became household names among the generation that keeps Ernest Cline in Kool-Aid. Kids went nuts. I'd say you had to be there, but Turtles have transcended the generational divide. The post-boomer Utes...
Did you say Utes?
...of the last few generations have all had their own version of Turtle Mania, and it continues to this day with new movies, shows, games, and merch, occasionally flickering but never really burning out in the last 4 decades. While the comics remain dark and bleak, the cartoons and their associated video games were retooled to target a market likely to still plead with their parents a couple of times a year for gigantic plastic playsets or branded airwalks or, more recently, caches of fake currency. Owing to its softer storylines and more kid-friendly plastic-pushing persona, controversy surrounding the band of reptilian Ronin was fairly minimal. No doubt they raised the hackles of herpetologists and Eastern historians, a few of whom surely petitioned to have them renamed to adolescent mixed martial arts tortoises or something similar, and there were definitely parents who seethed at their softball antics, accusing them of glorifying violence and junk food, but it never really spiked the needle above the constant background noise people who hate fun tend to produce. Except in Europe. Stricter children's programming laws and possibly a stickler who took issue with the Turtles never employing poison or taking mercenary money pushed the franchise to be rebranded Teenage Mutant Hero Turtles in the land of weird outlets and 50Hz TVs. Undaunted by the new moniker, the Turtles pressed on to become an international hit who still pack theater seats and move game inventory to this day. And speaking of games, in general terms, maybe the only thing more important to a kid in the 80s and 90s than the manufactured scarcity of Saturday morning programming was video games. We played them when we could. When we couldn't, we talked about them, read about them, ate their cereals, wore their logos, passed around their myths and legends. Did you know you could unlock Sheng Long by beating Street Fighter 6 times in a row without getting hit? You couldn't, but we were convinced you could. Regardless of gender, economic standing, which holidays you did or didn't celebrate, what after-school activities you participated in, everyone was talking about video games. So, naturally, the Turtles gang... Are Turtles a gang? What do they call a group of... Clutch? A muddle? Hold on. A bale? Really?
I want you off the fucking set, you prick!
Okay, the Turtle... Bale... made their way to digital entertainment. Not without a few hurdles. Turtle hurdles. To hurdles. 2 short years after the cartoon hit the airwaves, in the middle of the frenzy around their toy line, Konami, a small Japanese game developer you've probably never heard of, released Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles for the Famicom, and shortly after the NES, albeit under the name Ultra to get around Nintendo's draconian release limits. The cover was adorned with comic book artwork in North America, something most of the fandom had never even seen. The Turtles all sported red masks and belts. They had facial expressions ranging from somber to downright aggressive, an odd choice given that the vast majority of the market was brought in by the cartoon. The game itself did retain the color coding of the heroes despite the box being more true to its comic roots, but that callback to a softer origin belied the brutal, unforgiving game underneath. Perhaps the cover was a warning to loins everywhere. Get girded or else. Rumbling in the schoolyards began. Many of us had to wait until the cold months of winter to get new games, but those lucky few with mid-year birthdays or divorced parents jockeying to buy their affection would funnel information to the unwashed throngs throughout the year as we watched the multiple infinities of the months leading up to the holidays tick by. The game sucked. Now, put down your anti-mutagen pitchforks. I know it has its fans these days. But back in the times before the internet, when strategy guide misprints and paid magazine spots were all we had, it was basically impenetrable. And it didn't look like the cartoon. Add to that before the holiday buying season was in full swing, we also got our first glimpse of what a Turtles game really could be. The arcade game, also from Konami, though by appearances a Konami that didn't speak to the first one anymore and wasn't welcome in its home. It hit bowling alleys and arcades with a force big enough to cause the extinction of most land mammals. No wait, that was that Jelly Bean guy again, never mind. The arcade game had turtles who looked like the turtles we all knew and loved. It had music that sounded like the music from the show. It had bosses that occupied the entire run rather than being killed off in the first couple chapters. Market-facing mutants top to bottom. Gone was the ambiguity and faux pas of wearing the same outfit to the company party. Gone was the grimdark undertone. And as the mass market target demo, we loved it. We'd absolutely engorge machines with our parents' laundry money. Our hands and knees would be filthy from quarter hunting under cabinets, just to play the first level for the 16th time and die at Rocksteady. Lunches were skipped as we fed our addictions instead of our bodies. This was the TMNT game we wanted, but we'd have to wait an entire year to get any semblance of that outside of the arcade. We had food at home, and it was damn level and onions with a side of Sprite Flicker. And we still ate it, to the tune of 4 million copies. We all hated it enough to make it the 11th best-selling Nintendo game of all time. Any port in a storm. But we all wanted more, and more we eventually got. First, the arcade game was reworked into something that would fit on the NES, a system slowly being replaced in our living rooms by the encroaching 16-bit tidal wave. Shortly after, the Turtles landed in our pocket, which both is and isn't a euphemism, with Fall of the Foot Clan on Game Boy, the last console your grandmother would ever remember the name of. And before you rush to the comments section, yes, home computers all had their own versions of Turtles games during this time frame. But nobody talked about their computers.
You can get beat up for something like that.
If it didn't screw into an antenna mount and require your TV to be on channel 3, it was clandestine whispers for your Thursday night user group. Around this time, through a miraculous alignment of heavenly bodies, or the sparing of a magical fish, or the kissing of cursed royalty, I can't remember which, I became a fairly early adopter of the fledgling Sega Genesis. Mega Drive if you're nasty. Never has an entire generation of gaming been wiped from my life faster than the 8-bit era after first being told in scratchy, compressed, but not uncertain terms to rise from my grave.
Rise from your grave.
Sorry, NES. Welcome to your doom. Genesis did what Nintendo isn't. Except Turtles. The lack of salmonella-carrying crime fighters was deafening. But they'd show up, right? They had to. Well, like Orpheus before me, I ignored the warnings of Oasis, mainly because they hadn't said it yet, and looked back. Before my wait ended, the sour taste of envy rose in my throat as that inferior, weak, pathetic gray box got another excellent release in the Manhattan Project in late '91. The planet shifted, my fish escaped, the cursed princess wanted to see other people, and a Super Nintendo became unobtainable to me, so I continued to tell myself 3 buttons was enough for anyone, and harumphed my way through the early days of 16-bit dominance, convinced that I'd see the Fab Four, not the ones who dropped acid on Red October, the ones we've been talking about, any day now. Any day. I mean, an amazing live-action film had just been released last spring. New games were hitting the arcade. Surely the blast processing powerhouse that hosted the best Disney licenses and Marathon Meth Rodent would soon be dripping with mutagenic ooze, right? Then came the announcement. A new Turtles game. For a home console. Oh, delight. Based on Turtles in time for the arcade? An absolute smash hit that had wrapped me in a hypnotic trance for hours as I watched people with more money than me get our nation's most prized monuments back from a Cuisinart that wished to be a real boy. Oh, happy day. And it was coming to Super Nintendo?
Well, screw that!
The early summer months of 1992 had me pacing my room, wishing pestilence and poverty on producers whose names I didn't even know. How could they do this? Unjust. Unforgivable. Just as I was about to dig out my rope just so I could reach the end of it, a glimmer of hope peeked through the ads for thumb gloves and third-party controllers you wouldn't wish on your worst enemy in my gaming magazines. A Turtles game was also coming to the Genesis. Hyperstone Heist. A wholly unique and tailored experience. It was Turtles in Time. It was, that's what it was. It had a few levels combined and a few different pieces of content, some crunchier Genesis music that moved at a faster pace, more muted colors, but at its core, it was what I'd been wishing for. And you know what? It was great. I spent hours comparing notes at school, maintaining a cautious but mutually respectful rivalry with the SNES kids, going over differences, talking strategies, cursing Leatherhead as being the most unfair boss in game history. It took a long while to get there, but I finally had the Turtles game I had wanted since 1989, now easily 4 centuries behind me, in my home. Which was good, because after that there wasn't a good Turtles game released for 30 years. Okay, that's not true. There have been a few real standouts in the decade since Turtles in Time and Hyperstone. The Game Boy Advance TMNT game from 2007 is a shining light in that void and example.
A Jose Canseco bat? Tell me, you didn't pay money for this.
Definitely check it out if you haven't, but for the most part, the timeline of Turtles licensed games has been littered with near misses to outright failures, despite the property itself seeing a fair amount of success. Being acquired by Nickelodeon in 2009, shortly after a decent reboot in newfangled CG in 2007. Since then, it's been a mixed bag, from the lows of Aaron Burr Got Milk director Michael Bay taking the franchise in a... whatever the hell this
Thanks
is.
for the vote of confidence.
If we don't make it back, bring the mutagen to Splinter. It can save his life.
Sachs Laboratories on the 36th floor. I've already disabled the security system.
To the solid, better-than-you-think animated series from the 2010s, to the absolutely incredible Jonan Vasquez short starring the Workaholics cast. To the charming and fun 2023 Seth Rogen produced Mutant Mayhem. The narrative franchise has never reached the peak it hit in the late 80s, but it's never fallen into obscurity either, which is the true hallmark of a cultural touchstone. When it comes to video games, it's been far fewer hits than misses. That is until... Early in March of 2021, a new TMNT game was announced by Dotemu, the studio behind some of the best ports of classic games to modern consoles, and some of the absolute best continuations of those series, I'm looking at you, Wonder Boy and Streets of Rage 4, anyone could hope for. You may not agree, and that's fine. The X button is to the upper right of your browser window, or, if you're on a Mac, push the red thingy, make window go away. Okay, still here? Cool. So, Turtles was coming back, helmed by a company with a track record of doing a great job with that sort of thing. The hype was real. There was no possible way it could live up to... Oh my. Yeah, so it was good. It was very, very good. If you haven't played it, quit watching this video and go do it. If you have Game Pass, it's included. If you have Netflix, it's included. If you don't have either of those, get into a caustic relationship just so you can share logins long enough to play it. I'll wait.
Well, we're waiting.
Even if you don't have a service that already includes it, it's not exactly a bank-breaking game, coming in at under $30 with DLC. It's packed with content and is a completely different experience to play with 1, 2, or even 5 other players, remote or even locally, unless you're on PlayStation, where you're capped at 4 because science reasons and magnets and Hedy Lamarr and stuff.
It's Headley.
Okay, case closed. The game is great. All is right with the world. Roll credits. But that's not how the retro enthusiast community works. We've had one great Turtles game, yes, but what about the whiny, petulant child who lives inside every one of us? The one who refuses to let go of the past and keeps making references to a dead actor who ruined the free world. What about that person? Well, luckily, the retro gaming community also has some absolute geniuses burning their brief candle to bolt together an impossible past today. Enter Savok. No, he's not one of Spock's family members introduced in the third act to add drama to the sequel. He's a graphics modder and ROM hacker. Check out the links in the description. You know how YouTube works. Shortly after Shredder's Revenge came out, Savok, PPI Akiko, and SKL got together and decided that the Genesis game we all deserved back in those bleak, dark months between its release and Hyperstone Heist was achievable. In fact, it had already been made back in 1992 as a sequel to Bare Knuckle, or as it's known in Western markets, Streets of Rage, a Mega Drive exclusive that was meant as a direct response to Capcom's highly successful Final Fight series. I'll save that whole story for another video, but for now, just know that there's a game, Bare Knuckle 2, which exists on the Genesis that has some of the best, smoothest side-scrolling brawler action of the generation. And Savok and crew decided to make it better by adding turtles, like some kind of 16-bit terrarium. And it was amazing! Beyond just updating the graphics, they reworked the game engine to incorporate moves for enemies and heroes alike from Shredder's Revenge. They updated enemy patterns, changed sounds, and even added a turbo mode and options to allow for a more responsive modern brawler feel. All just amazing additions. As great as the hack was, and I can't stress enough, it was great.
You are great.
It had a few issues. First and foremost was a graphics bug, which caused large portions of the game to have a flickering sprite issue. The Mega Drive, like other consoles of the time, utilized tile-based graphics. Sprites, or the characters rendered on the screen separate from the background planes, are made up of a number of 8x8 tiles. These tiles are fed to the Video Display Processor, or VDP, through a process which reconstructs them into mapped chunks which have links to the rest of the chunks that make up the final image. It sounds confusing, but don't worry, it is. The important thing to know is that the memory that writes a full image to your screen gets filled with 8x8 tiles, which are relative to one another, not absolute. And only a Sith deals in absolutes. Only a Sith. The memory is reserved for these strips of tiles in chunks, and that memory is mapped by the developer. So far, no problem. But computers, in general, start counting at 0, and humans, in general, start counting at 1. So a list of 50 things to a human has 50 elements, but a list of 50 things to a computer has 51. And that's where the problem kicks in. 50 human-counted slots were reserved for a tile set with a computer-counted length of 50. The last tile overlapped into the next sprite's starting tile space. This caused some odd behavior. Most often it was simply a tailpipe of a motorcycle and the fist of a foot soldier swapping back and forth very quickly, causing a flicker and graphical glitch, but sometimes it got a little more interesting. Next was an issue with a specific graphics function hard-coding a command to use PAL, the European video standard. TVs in North America, half of South America, many parts of Japan, Korea, and other nations in the Pacific, Africa, and the Middle East use a broadcast standard known as NTSC, or Never the Same Color. National Television System Committee. A standard designed to be backwards compatible with black and white transmissions during a changeover from black and white to color television signals. You're probably familiar with these color bars if you live in a region which uses NTSC. Or maybe you have nightmares about this doll instead. Who's to say who had it better? Because old systems used consumer televisions as monitors, they had to use broadcast standards to display their graphics. The video processor had to know which standard it was targeting. Normally, this is pulled dynamically from the system and either stored in memory to be called upon quickly or used to pre-calculate the calls that will be made during the game. In this case, however, they were just hard-coded to PAL, which caused a single frame to lose sync with the signal if you're on an NTSC system. This isn't a big deal if you're playing on an old CRT display. You'll just get a single frame roll before it corrects itself. But if you're capturing footage or using certain emulators, it can completely block you from playing the game. The last issue, like so many issues I have, is one of jealousy. It's a hell of a motivator. A number of modern improvements are possible with existent video games these days. People have cleaned up color work, fixed bugs, but also added improvements like full motion video or CD quality audio, the latter of which I was very interested in for this ROM hack. Yes, Yuzo Koshiro's soundtrack is undeniably excellent. It's iconic. I mean, just listen. It pushed the Genesis sound system in ways that was seldom pushed on the console. The music is memorable, invigorating, timeless, but it's not Turtles. It fits the aesthetic of the original game to a T, no argument there. But with the new graphics and gameplay, a more fitting soundtrack was in order. Now, we come to a bit of contention about retro gaming. There's no need for the contention, but people love their camps. So, I'm going to preface this by saying, I think you should game however you like. However you want. Whatever makes you happy. If you like playing 4x3 games stretched to fit a 16x9 screen piped through smeary filters, you do you. If you want a perfectly accurate experience, refuse to use anything but original hardware, despise HDMI upscalers, again, games are Burger King. Have it your way. For me, I prefer using an FPGA solution.
Give me the blister.
Nope.
Give it to me.
No.
Give it to me.
I said no, Mr. Rutherford!
I have original consoles. I have original games. You might have seen them in the back of our shots. I have a Steam Deck and other modern options in all manner of relational space to my wazoo. But my choice is FPGA for its clean video signal, convenience of capturing, versatility, accuracy, and ability to be pumped out to original display hardware. From there, we get to the second set of camps. Without getting into too much detail, there are a number of FPGA solutions, including some which are a hybrid of old console hardware. Those solutions all have different capabilities and different developers with different views on what's right or wrong. Owing to that, there are also multiple standards for adding some of these modern features to old games, and multiple viewpoints on doing it at all. Originalists want their games as if they just opened the package back in the day. Experimentalists want to see how far they can push things, and neither is correct or incorrect. What is incorrect is thinking yours is the only way it should be. Refusing to take the time to consider someone else's desires or needs and mandating that nobody should want something is just childish. And there's a lot of that in this hobby. So I'm sure folks are going to sound off in the comments. Oh, there I was, standing on a soapbox. Hold on, let me get off of this. I say all of this as a bit of backstory to why I decided to do this. A ROM hacker named Retro Show has already made a CD music improvement for this ROM hack. If you have a Mega SD from Terra Onion, you should go check out his Twitter. I won't link to it because the platform is dead to me, but he's the only Retro Show on there. You'll sort it out. The problem with that particular ROM hack, apart from being just a music edition, is it doesn't work on Mr.'s Mega CD core. I mean, technically because of that bug where the video mode switches. The ROM hack itself just doesn't work on the core. I decided to fix that too. But it still prevents it from working on things like the Analog Pocket or the Gens emulator. Once the bug in the core was fixed, there was also the pesky issue of standards to get past. The hack from Show used a system called MD+. This was designed by Terra Onion for use with their flash card. It's a pretty neat setup and allows for some great control of CD music through a Q file, a file designed to help generate a table of contents for the CD and burners and emulated systems. There's a link in the thing, you know the place. MD Plus allows things like looping and track start locations to be mapped in this easily editable file. It also supports truly zero delay looping, but it's not supported on MiSTer. The other standard, which is supported on MiSTer, is MSU MD. This was designed originally for the EverDrive Pro and actually loads a driver which sends commands to real Mega CD hardware addresses. So a cartridge game can have enhanced audio with a real CD and a real Mega Drive. Both have advantages and disadvantages, and I don't want to get into which is better. I wish both were available everywhere, honestly, but that isn't going to happen, so I wanted to make a CD experience for my setup of choice. MSU MD can be used on those other flashcards as well, making it the most portable solution, if not the most technically useful one. I had my goals set out for me. First and foremost, I wanted Turtle CD music in the game on MiSTer. Secondly, I wanted to fix the specific graphical bug with 50 tile sprites. Thirdly, I wanted to try and get this working on the Analog Pocket spiritualized core, which is susceptible to the PAL issue as mentioned earlier. Fourthly, I wanted to make the CD music loop in interesting ways. And whatever the last number was, plus onely, I wanted to pass the old music through if CD hardware wasn't present, so if anyone wanted to make a cartridge, it wouldn't be silent in a Mega Drive without a CD unit attached. Those are my goals. I had some time. Now, I just had to learn everything from zero.
If you wish to make an apple pie from scratch, you must first invent the universe.
There is a wealth of information on the internet for 68,000 programming. Too much wealth. Scrooge McDuck in his money bin, Union Carbide, Jackie Gleason messing with Richard Pryor wealth. It can be utterly overwhelming. I stumbled my way around trying to manually reverse hex into something understandable with a 68K reference sheet. That was a fool's errand. Ultimately, I stumbled upon a decompiler in my searching that does most of what I need. You can find the tools I ended up using down below. In the description, not you. you don't have to live a life of sin to get to them or anything. From there, I did a lot of poking and monitoring, finding what changed when certain events happened. Basically, that scene from The Matrix where Cypher has the weirdest line delivery ever.
The image translators work for the construct program.
Really? You went with that? It took me days to learn each piece I needed, then days more to learn how to integrate it back into the game code. Adding music turned out to be the easiest part. I just hijacked the existing music player, which Sega kindly labeled, and sent CD commands if the hardware existed. Otherwise, I just passed it back to the existing code. But the graphics were a whole other beast. I had to learn how they were being written to the system's memory, hijack that process, dynamically change that data, point the system back to the change data, and then cover my tracks so the rest of the level code worked as intended. So did it work?
Old and busted, new hotness.
Fixing the video signal issue was actually straightforward. The way the Mega Drive processor writes the video control is well documented. Looking for a specific value being written to the control port in RAM was one of the most straightforward pieces to all this. Thankfully, MAME, which is what I ended up using as my primary debugging software, has watch points that are very configurable. So that was it. I had reached my goal list. The game now had CD music, the music would default to the in-game soundtrack if there was no Mega CD attached, and the weird issue that kept it from working on the Pocket was fixed, the foot soldiers had their hands back, the audio loops were doing exactly what I wanted. Time to wrap it, so anyway I decided to keep poking at it. One of the things I'd noticed in testing was that there was an empty menu slot in options between voice and turbo. The cursor would stop on a ghost input. After a little looking through the disassembly, I found there used to be a round select option in the options menu. This exists in the original game, by the way, hidden behind a secret button combination. If you press A and B on controller 2 while selecting options and entering it with start on controller 1, you'll get a hidden menu in Streets of Rage 2. Shenlong's power will be yours. The ROM hack looks like it used to include this round select, but it had been hacked around. So, I rewired it. I can see why they took it out, as a few stages won't load assets unless you start from the first section of the stage. Leaving that in was the 6th item on my goal list. But 6 is a weird number.
No, not 6. I said 7. 7 elevens?
Yeah.
7 dwarfs? 7, man, that's the number. 7 chipmunks twirling on a branch, eating lots of sunflowers on my uncle's ranch.
I decided after being emboldened by my menu change that the menu could use another option, CD volume. Most CD audio hacks just replace music and call it a day, because other developers are smart and know when to quit picking at things. Not me. Maynard James Keenan wrote a whole song about it. If you want to see the solution I came up with, be sure to check out my GitHub page. If you want to see the result, it's this.
Big Apple, 3 a.m. Big Apple, 3 a.m.
Boop. That's it. Days of my life. It goes up, it goes down. Stay in school, kids. Learn a trade. Don't let the siren song of retro gaming entice you into the sea. There's nothing in the waves but despair and heartbreak. Kelp. Lots of kelp. So that's it. That's the entirety of my improvements to the Shredder's Re-Revenge ROM hack, and I'm quite happy with it. I hope you are too. If you're interested in the patch, I suggest going to your search engine of choice and looking for a magical forum. Forums are what we call Discord when Friends was still getting new episodes, by the name of Zeldix. Since because of corporate glad-handing, giving you any more information than that would result in this video getting taken down, no doubt. If you enjoy what I'm doing here, let me know in the comments or tag me on Blue Sky at yourlamefriends.com. Until then, remember that forgiveness is divine, but never pay full price for late pizza.
I gotta get a new route, and I thought I delivered everywhere.